All right. Welcome, everyone, to Of Gods and Game Masters, World Building Workshop, and Ask Me Anything. Settlements Edition. We've done settlements before, but one of the things I want to do here is go kind of through step by step and use my town of Marshcliff as an example. I've been working on it for quite a while, and it is very in-depth. One of the first things I want to do, though, is make very clear you do not have to get this in-depth to have a successful town. Instead, what you really need when you are just first getting into it, right, is a fairly simple setting. And I talk about this in my GM Tips blog for session 1. I don't know how to add an umlaut to an A in Google Docs. I wish I did. So when you're starting out, use a simple setting. All you really need is your home base, a safe place for role play, shopping, place to pick up quests and missions. Okay. In video games, they call it a social hub. Let me link in what I'm actually working from here. We'll get back to that in a bit. I didn't say I'd have answers to everything, Devious. I drink coffee and I know things. I don't drink coffee and know everything. Those are different statements. All right. So when we are building a home base, we really just need, especially for fantasy, but this works for any game really, what you need is a tavern and an inn in the surrounding village. In Star Wars or Star Trek or a space game, it's a cantina and a planet and a space station, right? Nearby wildernesses to adventure in, nearby dungeons, things that easily affect what you're going into, right? That's really about all you need. Okay, we have world building your initial settlements. And this actually refers to the depth of a settlement. And to my Marshcliff supplement specifically. So what we've got there, oh good, it's already linked. What does your initial settlement need and how do you describe it? Okay, it's got to be simple. You've got an initial home base. Oh, I in fact did see it. It looks good. About the only thing I would say is if, as I suspect, that's the bad guy for Winter's Heart, can you make her a little shorter and curvier? Because she's supposed to be a dwarf. So the initial home base you make might or might not be a safe space. The action might bring itself right into the town. PCs might have to deal with it there. What you need, though, is a tavern or inn. The smaller the town, the more you need one. It's the center of your social hub. That's where everyone gets news. That's where a bounty board might be. In a lot of small medieval towns, it's the de facto town hall. The innkeeper's often the mayor or the closest thing to it if the miller isn't. But if it isn't, then the church probably is and serves all the same functions. So that's probably either the first or second most important thing in town is their church, or more than one if it's a bigger settlement. You need a church or a temple. Maybe it's to one god particularly important to the town, like a god of agriculture for farming settlements, or the god of the sea for a fishing and shipping town. Maybe it's for the whole pantheon, which is pretty common, actually. Whichever way you choose, the temple can provide minor healing services, spiritual guidance, and be a major source of quests, like for your more religious characters. See if you can get your priests and paladins connected to that specific temple. There's a lot of hooks and sense of stakes in church-given quests. You need at least one shop. A small general store is fine for a hamlet or village, a place where the tinkers and traders come in and bring their stuff. They don't have to have everything a party might need, or even be able to buy much, but they should have basic stuff. Normal residents need this stuff, anything they can't make, farm, hunt, or gather on their own. You need some residents, some NPCs with just enough quirks to be interesting. The innkeeper, the shopkeeper, the priest or priestess are obvious, but a couple of village elders, the town drunk, some kids, a family or two can spice things right up, especially if you make sure the PCs have ties to them. If the PCs are from the town, which honestly is optimal if it's your starting town, make sure you detail their families, preferably very much alive, and their friends. Player investment will go through the roof if they have good reasons to care about what happens to these people and can legitimately make a difference. Then you build in adventures and hooks right into the nearby area, maybe the town itself. Undead in the graveyard suddenly, wild animals threatening the village for unknown reasons, raids by bandits or thugs of any species, maybe some weird monsters doing bad things in the back alleys or the sewer. What matters here is that it's a real threat, not just a nearby dungeon. Don't get me wrong, a nearby dungeon is great, but only if the critters inside pose a threat to the settlement. And that nobody but the PCs can fix it, which usually means that first settlement's probably small, out of the way, forgotten, or isolated, with no local nobility or real militia unless the authorities are incompetent or don't care. So what can you have that's maybe not so critical for that first settlement? How many people should live there? How many buildings? What services should a place have? Well, I've got a free town format, which I have given you guys repeatedly, and I will share again. That you can use as a guideline to fill it out and maybe follow along with what we're doing here as well. It's got more info on it than most formats and gives you a great template. Second, I want to direct you to a work by S. John Ross, Medieval Demographics Made Easy. Use it all the time. Look him up and follow him on social media. He's great. Here is the link to the medieval demographics because it gives you a good idea of what is supposed to, how many of each thing you need in a town based on its number of people, etc. Basic thing to remember is that every specialist you have in the town needs 10 people who are your basic farmer types, right? So that town with an innkeeper and a priest and a shopkeeper, it means there's at least 30 other people unless the little town is dying. In most cases, it's only 3 or 4 households because nobody lives in nuclear families before the modern day. Now, of course, that's totally different if you're going into future settings, then you could have many more households. But in a pre-industrial setting, you can expect 8 to 10 people in a household. That household will have 3 buildings, like a house, a barn, an outhouse, maybe a storage shed. If you get to 40 people or so, you're going to have a blacksmith. Otherwise, multiple little towns get to share them. It's probably not a weaponsmith or an armorsmith. It's just a blacksmith. Basic tools, horseshoes, knives, maybe spears. A weaponsmith or an armorer will be at the nearest actual castle or free city. If it's a hunting town, you get a bowyer / fletcher at about 50 people. Hunters, farmers, fishermen, herdsmen, these count as unspecialized. In smaller villages, they make and maintain their own tools. One of the spouses in a relationship will absolutely need to stay at home and do a lot of labor to maintain it if the other spouse is going out in the field or the woods or on the water fishing, especially if they have kids. The kids will be expected to do chores and help, or they're going out with the other spouse to learn the family trade. I want to caution you against trying to get too big for your first settlement if you build it yourself. Wait until you have practice and have figured out what works before you move to bigger towns and cities. Thorps are like 50 or less people. Hamlets up to like 200 people. Villages like 200 to 500 people are safer and easier and can really build up investment as your PCs literally know everyone in town. Towns like 500 to about 3,000 people are decent, but they're also hard work. You can use this one, mine, Marshcliff, which we'll talk about as we're going on, when it eventually comes out. I've been working on it for like 4 freaking years. If the area is known to be dangerous, there will be a wooden stockade and some kind of watchtower, both of them manned by villagers on rotation. But it's often a lot more fun for a village or hamlet to have been peaceful up till now and have few actual defenses. All of this is already in a video on YouTube that you can refer to, so you don't necessarily have to take notes. Yes, the stay-at-home spouse usually also does a craft, specifically what they would call handicrafts or home crafts, like weaving or seamstress or something like that very often. So that's kind of our intro to basic settlement world building. As we go through what we're working on Marshcliff, however, using it for examples, we are going to get a lot more in depth. So here is Marshcliff. Marshcliff is a relatively small town. It's definitely bigger than a village, right? And it has a full stone wall, which you can see on the map. It's got about 1,600 people. And we will go through that and cover individual things bit by bit. One of the reasons I've got it open in the mapping program instead of just a picture is because it's a lot easier to highlight things. Also, I think I need to highlight that more and make it more visible on the map. Anyway, so the town of Marshcliff, it's like 400, 500 yards across, has about 1,600 people. You'll note that it has 2 different gates to get in. It's got your north gate, which is a little more heavily, it has a gatehouse. The east gate, which is the primary gate down here, is protected by a couple of towers, right? You'll also notice an interesting thing that in a lot of cases, you'll see a lot of villages right at village-like settlements, little clusters of houses outside the walls in a walled town, because they come along later. There's not room inside, but they still want to have the town as a place to retreat to. It's still considered a place of safety, especially this one, which has these 2 exterior smaller fortresses, like at Riverward here, and at Lakeland here, that are held by knights who are subordinate to the local lord. And their job is to protect the exterior area and keep watch over things, basically. This area down here is that aforementioned adventuring area I talked about. At least one of them. The Black Swamp, which I have a whole series of adventures that I'm working on for it. Oh, no. Tessie, this isn't necessarily a low-tech setting. This is kind of a different setting. This is more a standard Tales of the Valiant setting. So definitely there's a lot more things that might have magic on them, especially primitive runes, because this particular setting is a Celtic-inspired setting. Yeah, this is not part of the settings that we've worked on before. It's just an example of what I'm trying to use, basically. I haven't gotten quite this in-depth on any of my low-tech settings, really. Yeah, so you'll notice you've got actual neighborhoods here, and I may... magic Celtic knots and runes and Ogum and things like that absolutely are perfect in this kind of setting. Especially Celtic-inspired magics, right? And the Celtic knots and tattooing are certainly... Oh, it absolutely would. There's straight-up runic magic systems in GURPS. There are probably runic magic systems in the upcoming Northlands supplement for Tales of the Valiant. I'm going to pitch it here, even though it's not mine. I backed it, and I think it's really cool. And it does Norse stuff. GURPS is literally my absolute favorite game. Tales of the Valiant is good, mainly because it scratches that old-timey, I'm a D&D player itch while being better, and the company that does it is not as evil. But GURPS is literally my favorite game. And if you want to learn GURPS, look on my Start Playing Games, and I have all kinds of GURPS games available. Constantly starting new ones, that sort of thing, where I will teach anybody who wants to learn. There's my Start Playing. We also talk about that sort of thing and get people informed, and you can get together with people who are not, in fact, charging you. Unfortunately, I'm in the situation where I kind of have to because I'm dead broke. But there may be other people on my Discord, which if you haven't joined, you should, who can work with you, and you can learn other games as well. So, as we continue to look at this, you'll note that we have here, currently outlined in blue, right? The Defender's Church. That is a temple to the War God. But we also have the Brewer's Ale House, which is both a tavern and a temple to the Dagda, the good god. And that's not even the only one, because over here, selected in light blue in the top left is the High Temple, which is dedicated to all the great gods and the god of the sun and storm. Lu the Long-Handed, also possibly the same person as Bel, possibly the same person as Tyrannus. Either way. So the High Temple is dedicated to the great gods, as it were. We also have a lower chapel over here that is for everyone to use. In the particular case of the lower chapel, let me run down to it. Now, the lower chapel is a temple of the Dagda. I need to fix that. That may not be right. Because we also have the high temple is dedicated to Belenas and Auron. Belenas, again, may also be Lu the Long-Handed. It's kind of complicated. Depends on which way you're doing. This was originally built to use the not at all accurate Celtic pantheon in the DMG, right? So, ease of use and all that, but it's going to need some updating. Still good for examples. Cliff. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. The Brewer's Ale House, interestingly enough, is in fact a temple to Govanen. I had forgot that the brewer is not the Dagda. The brewer and the smith are the same person, which is kind of interesting. But anywho. So yeah, you got multiple temples handling different things. You got this big inn, the Dragon's Horn Inn, all in a very central area. It's probably maybe the second thing was built. There's not a restaurants per se don't really come about until the late Enlightenment, early Renaissance. The closest thing you'll get is the ale houses, the inns, the taverns like the Tarnished Coin, and the Stinking Fish down here in the bottom left, which will serve food. And I'm sure the Stinking Fish serves frog legs. It serves seafood and swamp food of all kinds. Oh yeah, one more church. The Chapel of the Sea Lord down in the dock area. So 1,600 people, but a bunch of chapels and churches. We've got a storage area that's for storing food and things for the settlement. We've got a granary specifically just for holding wheat and barley and things. Kind of gator. It's not entirely clear whether the critters in the Black Swamp are gators or are crocodiles, but they're freaking there, which is super interesting considering it's a Celtic-inspired town, but it's right in this big swamp with every swampy critter you can imagine living there. So it's kind of like, what if New Orleans was founded by Irishmen rather than Spaniards and Frenchmen? So that's kind of cool, I think. But we have an old quarry here where they used to dig stone. We got stables attached to the Dragon's Horn Inn. Marshcliff Castle, that's important. You got your castle from which the area is ruled. And in this case, it's got an ancient wall around it that is supposedly built by giants called the Ogre's Fence. But we have this overview. Southern Salt Marsh down here is a little safer than the Black Swamp. Here's the actual Delta area here, which actually kind of includes all this. You'll notice down here you got your fisher folk houses. Out here you got your farmers. The river is fed both by this super deep lake and by rivers coming down from the mountains in the southeast here. All right? So that gives you a good idea. Oh, this place is big enough to actually have a city watch. It's got a watch house here. It's got its marketplace with the connected specific, marketplace, tavern, town green, that sort of thing. Now, we've done kind of an overview. Now let's get into kind of the nitty-gritty. of what I have established for the setting. And we can go through bit by bit and talk about, as per the usual, the specifics. Such as, this is the Marshcliff document that I have been working on for truly only the gods, whoever they may be, know how long. Marshcliff is set up as a small town. You can tell, it uses the format that I established because I went through and found that none of the formats that they put in the setting books and the world books that I've seen ever had enough detail in them for me. Again, you don't need all this detail to run a good town, but all of this detail eventually and all of this depth can be super helpful for running a long-term game in the setting. Okay, so the first thing on our list is Marshcliff, small town. If you're in a game like Dungeons and Dragons where they have alignments, you can then put a basic settlement alignment there. What kind of people are here? What do they really believe in? Lawful good, chaotic good, whatever. This town is mostly wavering between neutral good and lawful good, so they're mostly good people. So the authorities of this town, and you really need to always think about any settlement who's in charge, right? That's why authorities is at the top of the list. In this case, it's Baron Devon Marshcliff, and it's a feudal lordship, meaning that he has subordinates who owe him fealty. At the moment in the setting, Marshcliff is itself actually an independent settlement, so Baron Marshcliff does not owe fealty to anyone else. But he has knights and so on owing. Oh, yeah, no, I have, you're not at all crazy. My lizard folk in the area are specifically crocodilian. At least some of them. And I have a sub-race built for that. So you're not at all crazy. It's perfectly reasonable. One of the next things that we cover is commerce. That's not a bad name, actually. Aladile, but I would have a tendency to possibly, in this setting, give it a name that is like a Celtic word for alligator, if there is one. Crogal. Oh, I like that, actually. The Gallic word for crocodile and alligator is Crogal. That's neat. So yeah, let's use that. Lizard folk, parentheses, Crogal. All right. Yeah, me too. So the next thing we have in our steps of creation, or at least in our list of the format, is commerce. While not an exceptionally rich town, Marshcliff does have substantial water trade, and most normal goods can be acquired here. The products of the swamp, the river, and the ocean are cheapest. There's a single inn, the Dragon's Horn, and some residents might let rooms to long-term guests. There are several taverns. Truly needy folk might find housing at the Big House, a lodging for wayward souls that combines an orphanage with a hostel. The Big House is a really central thing that I'm putting in this setting. We'll get to that as we go down. So demographics and population. Roughly 1,600. About 45% humans, so a plurality but not a majority. Dwarves are about 15%. Halflings, which may be called brownies, depending, but whatever, about 15%. Kobolds, 14%. as legitimate parts of the town. Elves are about 4%. The Krogal are about 4%. Karkinoi, which are crab people, are about 1%. Turtle folk, whether they be turtles or we use a different name since turtles belong to Wizards of the Coast, are about 1%. And about 1% of the others have whatever they might be. There might be some air magic wielding navigators. It's not that magical. There are magical people, but it is not fundamentally magical, right? It's way more magical than the settings we've been talking about because it's kind of default D&D. There probably is. Is there a Celtic word for snapping turtles? Oh, Irish Gaelic for turtle is ttrtar. So, yeah, so we would go with ttrtar or seen ttrtar. I don't know if there's a separation between fresh or salt water. I don't know that they care. There's only 1% of them, so it wouldn't be super significant. There is, by the way, a very interesting dynamic between some of the kobolds in town. And whether we call them kobolds or dragonborn, both are actually available in the set in Tales of the Valiant now, and that's where I'm going to go for this setting primarily. But there is some interesting dynamics there for that we will get into as we go on. I need to find out the Irish word for crabs, actually. So the word portan, is the word for crab. So instead of using the Greek, not the mythic version. These are little part dragon people, not the version. Like, I have plenty of cool mythic versions in some of my other settings, one of which you're in, but this is D&D kobolds. So as you can see, we're going through and fixing some stuff. So it's not just me. I promise it's not just me rambling this time, right? Although, you guys probably are like to hear me ramble some. I don't know, maybe. Not exactly. So I have actually a whole thing about where Dragonborn and kobolds intersect. In Tales of the Valiant, you've got normal kobolds, which are the normal size. Then you've got true scale kobolds, which are human sized. And they may be like Dragonborn. I need to decide whether I'm using Dragonborn or not. But here's the interesting thing. Kobolds in all of my settings and Dragonborn in all of my settings are literally born originally. Like, they breed true now, but they were originally born from dragons. Let me link once again to another one of my things on the main blog. For this purpose, we're going to be using the oldest version of the alternate ecology, because it talks about kobolds and dragonborn, because my newest version of the alternate ecology uses all the names I use for them in all the names I use for them in my successor states of Rega. But yeah, my alternate ecology of dragons explains exactly where kobolds and dragonborn come from. But here's the other thing. You're also not actually wrong. There is a dynamic between dragonborn and kobolds who still serve a dragon or are clearly descended from a dragon, as opposed to free or wild dragonborn and kobolds. Not that there are usually free, there's not wildborn. You can always tell when a dragonborn is descended from what kind of dragon a dragonborn is descended from. And in the setting, there are two big dragonborn families that are kind of like in a Romeo and Juliet style setup. One is descended from a black dragon, one is descended from a gold dragon, and they're both important families in town. Despite the relatively low percentages, they're two of the major noble families that owe fealty to Baron Marshcliff. So, we got through that. Notable imports in this town is metals, finished products of all sorts, grain, food, right? While they do grow some grain of their own, they still have to import a lot. There's just not enough farmland. However, especially since they make a lot of ale, which means they need even more grain. Their notable exports are ale, fish, game, furs, leather goods, rare herbs, rare woods, things from the swamp, tons of animal hides like, snake hide and gator hide and all that. The architecture of the town is mixed. One of the reasons I bring up architecture at all is that you need to have an idea of what the place looks like to describe it, right? In this case, much of the town is fairly standard medieval European, with touches of the later elaborate architecture of the Gothic style. The castle itself is very old and plainly functional in a dwarven block style, as are a few other buildings in town. And we'll get to why that is. The giant's fence surrounding it is a marvel of Neolithic stonework, like a wall made out of Stonehenge. Yeah, like Drone and Brute, if they feel that way toward each other. The current conflict is actually more between the two dragonborn families. Many of the older buildings are built for defense, with either wide flat roofs or balconies around them, high narrow windows, and the like. We talk about crime because you should always know what crime looks like in any settlement bigger than a village. In this case, there is relatively little crime in the small, close-knit community. The Watch most often deals with drunken brawls or obnoxious out-of-towners. What crime there is carefully organized and controlled, and focuses its attention on the merchants, travelers, sailors, and adventurers that come to Marshcliff, not the residents. In addition, their predation is kept down enough that visitors are not driven off by it. The local Thieves Guild is under the strong control of Padraig Dragonshorn, the dwarf who also runs the town's inn. It is to be noted that no crime occurs at the Dragonshorn Inn, or is ever tolerated by either the Thieves Guild or the Watch. So the Thieves Guild leader is pretty well publicly known and runs the only inn in town. It's kind of like that quote from the patrician veterinary in the Watch books in Terry Pratchett's novels. If there must be crime, at least it will be organized crime. Law and order. Marshcliff is exceptionally well policed, with Sir Kirk Lavsiasta keeping the peace as captain of the watch. His 2 sergeants command the day and night watch respectively, and each of them can call on 2 corporals, 2 lance corporals, and 6 watchmen, for a total of 23 watchmen in uniform. They are all trained in basic firefighting and rescue, as well as law enforcement, because of course that's really what they're doing. They're protectors and first-line defenders, guards, as much as they are watchmen. You use the guard template from whatever book you're using. They wear studded leather and carry a hooked club for subdual and firefighting. So you whack them with the club part. The hooks are for yanking down burning stuff. They're only issued live steel under dire circumstances. If lethal force is required, the watch calls on the castle and its guard. All of the lineages and heritages and ancestries in the town are represented in the town watch. Like many walled towns on borders or frontiers, Marshcliff is laid out. The layout is important because it gives you an idea of how to get around the town, right? Marshcliff is laid out with wide main cobblestone streets for access and troop movement, but tight twisting side alleys for defenders to ambush from or lose pursuers in. Even the broad thoroughfares don't go straight to their destinations, nor are they in line with the gate. This is important for pre-industrial defense. You set up your roads so that even the roads they use to invade your town with are part of your defense. The castle itself is situated high on the cliff rising above the town, the swamp, and the ocean. You can see, let me get back to the cliff real quick. You can see over in this section, as I do this, bing, right? Over in this section, you can see there is a cliff rise for the north half of the town, especially the northwest, and that is literally why the town is called Marshcliff, because it was built, because the original castle, Marshcliff Castle, was built on the cliff above the swamp, for reasons we will definitely get into. Reasons. Always have reasons for why you built it, just because somebody may ask, and even if they don't ask, it gives you a better idea where things are going and why, right? All right, so persona. Persona is where we start talking about what the town is really like from the point of view of people living in it or people going to it. And Marshcliff is an odd mixture of parochial and cosmopolitan. It's a military outpost, a trade hub, a fishing town, a hunting town. Many of its inhabitants and those who live nearby live by hunting, fishing, or gathering, whether in the swamps and marshes or in the river and ocean. But it's also a border settlement on the edge of a massive swamp full of dangers, as well as a trade hub for the river, ocean, and land trade because of the rare goods the swamp provides. There are nearby farmers, and even some have gardens inside the walls. They're not enough to fully feed the town, so you have to depend on trade. As a rule, the townsfolk are kind and helpful, but perhaps due to the strong dwarven influence, they're blunt, direct, and rarely polite. There's just as many halflings as dwarves, but they're usually stouts, which we may not leave in the final version, but they're the kind of halflings that associate with dwarves. They're mostly act like dwarves anyway. The relatively high number of true-scale kobolds or dragonborn are near evenly split in lineage between black and gold. There's some friction there. A simmering family feud that is only rarely actually violent. Notably low, but still present, is the elven population, almost all wood elves or sea elves who hunt or fish in the swamp. The resident lizard folk are all descendants and relatives of the nearby lizard folk tribe in the swamp, with whom Marshcliff has actually had a mutual defense alliance for generations. Also of note is the somewhat surprising public community of small kobolds, and these are green-skinned kobolds, dark green. They don't actually look. It's partially a little part of both, right? I'll explain again the extreme dwarven influence as we go, but yes, dwarven frontier swamp culture is definitely a big part of it. So let's get into that. Let's add that. Thank you. Little column A, little column B. You're not wrong. Okay, so also of note is a somewhat surprising public community of small kobolds who are employed maintaining the old sewers that their clan dug out hundreds of years ago. The local kobold clan is a dark green color. They are treated as normal townsfolk for the most part, although there is some friction with some of the dwarven families. A few crab folk and turtle folk from the nearby waters, whether they be swamp or oceanic, also make their home in the town. The default that I had for this setting was that Marshcliff is assumed to worship the Celtic pantheon, with temples to Belenus and Aran, the High Temple, Manannan, the sea god, obviously their coastal town, Chapel of the Sea Lord, Nuada, the Defender's Church, and the Dagda, the Lower Chapel. The Brewer's Alehouse and the Blacksmithy both have shrines to Gavanen. Each temple does have shrines to the other members of the pantheon incorporated. In the setting you use, simply replace these gods with the most appropriate members of the local pantheon. For instance, you might replace Manannan with Poseidon, or you might replace Aran with Kelemvor if you're playing in the Forgotten Realms. I do intend for this to be a subsetting. Entirely possible. I would intend for this to be a subsetting that could be dropped into other Dungeons and Dragons or Tales of the Valiant settings. That way many more people can buy it. Yeah, eventually I'm definitely gonna finish this damn thing. Households also tend to have private shrines, altars, or chapels to either their patron deity or the pantheon as a whole. Druids, especially swamp-oriented druids, are very well regarded in town, although they never hold services within the walls. It is of note that when I say druids here, I mean the D&D / Tales of the Valiant character class druids, because the priests of the Celtic gods in an actual Irish setting would be considered druids and wouldn't necessarily have anything to do with nature priests. Your mileage may vary. Despite being a small town, that's art, festivals, and culture. That's what comes up next. Despite being a small town, Marshcliff has a deep veneration for art and artists, especially bards and storytellers, because the Celtic cultural influences. Many local goods are carefully decorated with elaborate knotwork and other artistic flourishes, even if they're intended for heavy use. In addition, the Baron acts as a patron for promising artists of all kind, and often pays for them to get expensive schooling elsewhere. Each of the taverns has their own resident minstrel, and plays host to visiting bards as often as possible to get the news, stories, and songs from abroad. The Baron has his own highly regarded court bard, but will also host other exceptional talents, especially if they're recommended by his own bard, who hits the taverns and so on to see what's going on. During midwinter, midsummer, and both of the equinox festivals, the town is flooded by visitors. All the local people from the nearby villages and some from quite a bit further away flock to the music, food, and ale that fill the streets. The temples also have all their own musicians and sometimes players, actors, as appropriate to their god, although many of them are amateurs, however talented they might be. This is a little picture. Oh, I should go back to the pictures, I think. This is a little picture of what part of the town of Marshcliff might actually look like. Yeah, lots of Celtic knots embossing on leather, lots of Celtic knots worked into the metal, etc., etc. What we're going to do now, the next part that I have coming up is the history. And it's a long and complicated bit. And I want to actually talk about it and handle a lot of different questions based on it when I do. So what I want to do now is go ahead and take my 10-minute break. And when we come back, we will talk about the history of a settlement, the whys and the wherefores. Do the watch have custom detailing done themselves, or are they prevented from doing so? I wouldn't say they're prevented from doing so. The watch would generally, they have a uniform and they don't do detailing on that uniform, but they can have detailing on weapons or shields or their helmet. The uniform armor comes with a badge so that you can easily identify them. And they never wear helmets that conceal their face for the same reason. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and take a 10-minute break, and we will come back and talk about the history of Marshcliff, where it came from, and why it is the way it is. I do appreciate everybody stopping by, and if you like what I do and you aren't already, please like, follow, and subscribe, and maybe do the same thing for me over on YouTube. Follow me on the various socials, and for the easiest way to figure out all the places to find me, because oh my goodness, are there places to find me. I'm everywhere. Here is the link for where to find me, and rather than throwing up my waiting now screen, I am instead going to just show that same page of where to find me for contact information, so you just kind of see the sorts of things, all the freaking links that are here. And you can subscribe to receive news and updates, make donations directly to support the site, whatever. Tons of stuff over there. If you haven't been to Of Gods and Game Masters yet at .com, please go. I'm going to take my 10-minute break, and we will come back thereafter and talk about history. So I'm back. So sorry it took extra long. Like I said, I think this one's going to run long, so I needed to recharge a little bit. Got my son making more coffee, so this should be decent. How we looking, guys? Assuming anybody else is back. Looks like we are. All right, so yeah, up on the screen right now is the ways to contact me. The link is right up there to the place, and you can follow me on all those locations and you know, help me out any way you can. You know, subscribing to my YouTube, for instance, is free, I've heard. But yeah, if you can, give me them likes, follows, and subscribes. Help me keep doing this work if you find it interesting. All right, so we're going to get into the weeds. We are going to get deep into history here. I will also note, yeah, the way I'm building this particular setting, it could work just as well for Tales of the Valiant, Dungeons and Dragons, Daggerheart. You could absolutely do it in GURPS, maybe other settings as well. Maybe other systems as well. And most of the setting as I have it set up isn't really dependent on mechanics very much, so you could probably use it in almost any fantasy role-playing game. That's kind of where some of the things I'm building are going to be going. All right, anyway, all that nonsense out of the way. We will quickly, once again, look at the cool map. And let me tell you, at least for understanding what you've built and what it is, a map can be essential. It's hard to communicate to players and their characters what a setting looks and feels like without maps. I use Wonderdraft and Dungeon Draft to make most of my maps. This particular setting has an irrational number of very small maps for buildings, and I'm planning to basically map every major building and have them available as battle maps or whatever. Maybe excessive, but you know, it'll be there. But here we are. Here is our town of Marshcliff. The walls, the castle, the area, a lot is said by this map, right? It tells you a lot about what the town is like, right? But it's not enough per se. What we do is we go and look, we talk deep dive historical stuff. Why does the city look like this? What caused the city to be built in such an interesting place? Well, we have answers. Over the years, there have been 3 separate settlements on the side of Marshcliff, over centuries, in fact. The first of all of them was... let me fix my camera a little bit. The first of all of them was a dwarven settlement over 1,000 years ago, and some of the oldest buildings in town date at least partially from this era, especially like the castle. Beneath the cliff at the time, there were decent veins of mithril, and both bog iron and gold could be found in the nearby swamp, which, by the way, is a real thing. Swamps can form, in this case, formed long ago in an extinct volcanic caldera, which means that there can be a lot of things that were mined in the bog itself. The northern edge of the volcanic caldera forms the cliffs for which Marshcliff is named. So the dwarves delved deep here and built a stronghold on the surface to trade with humans and others, and to foray into the swamp from. Inevitably, however, as such things do, their wealth and prosperity attracted unfortunate attention. The eye that fell on them was the eye of a great black dragon called Sathadrius Bearskull, whose original home was deep within the swamp, near the far southern and eastern edge, where the caldera rose up into the foothills of the mountains, from which many of the rich minerals of the swamp had washed down. Sathadrius was well known for his distinctive appearance. Some mutation or long ago accident had fused the scales of his skull into a single smooth surface and bleached them as well, making him look as if his skull-like face was bare of flesh entirely. Thus, Sathadrius Bearskull. He was served by several tribes of black-scaled kobolds and lizard folk as well, either descended from him or molded by his magic, or both. They struck at the dwarves, and the onslaught of acid and scales was too much. The few survivors fled. The deeps that the dwarves had carved, they collapsed a lot of. But the dragon and his minions ruled the cliff and the mines and hoarded all the wealth that the dwarves had claimed. For several long centuries, Sathadrius ruled the whole region. Even now, many of the dragon-blooded sorcerers in the area claim descent from him. Sathadrius ruled the area until an alliance was made against him, an alliance of humans and dwarves and the gold dragon Ariax. Ariax brought her own kobolds with her, gold of scale like herself. The men were led by Sir Kevan Brightblade, a knight from a nearby kingdom and a paladin of the sun god. Dwarves and humans, kobolds, lizard folk, and others, many died in that campaign. The last battle was fought on the cliffs themselves, just outside the castle. The one time the ogre's fence, which was erected by giants paid by Sathadrius to replace the curtain walls the dwarves had made that he himself had destroyed. It's the one time the ogre's fence was ever breached by a foe. When the smoke and fumes of the acid and fire finally cleared, Sir Kevan stood victorious, his foot on Sathadrius' neck, his sword in the dragon's jugular. The gold dragon Ariax lay fatally wounded, and no cleric, nor even Sir Kevan's ability to heal, could stave off her death. With her dying magic and the last of her power, she cleansed the region of Sathadrius' taint and freed the remaining scaled folk from his domination. While his true scales, or dragonborn, remained black of scale, they did not stay black of heart, and the lizard folk and kobolds became a far more natural green. While most of Ariax's servitors left with her body to carry it back to her home, some of the true scales remained, as well as her half-human daughter. Through that daughter, Arianrod, the blood of gold dragons flows in the veins of some of the locals, including the Baron's line. Sir Kevan was made Baron Marshcliff, and the stronghold and region claimed by his kingdom, while some of the dwarves settled there, and others took themselves to safer homes in the mountains with their regained treasure. Since that time, an uneasy peace, even an alliance, has existed between the folk of Marshcliff and the green-scaled kobolds and lizard folk of the swamp, and the black-scaled true scales, which I misspelled, that remained. Some of the eldest on both sides still hold grudges, even though that was 500 years ago, and none now live save perhaps the elves and dragons who saw the war. 13 barons have ruled Marshcliff since that time, with Lord Devon, the 14th Baron Marshcliff, ruling now. He still bears his ancestor's sword. Now, before we start talking about neighborhoods and more specific stuff like that, is when we should really get into questions and clarifications and history ideas for this setting, your own settings, etc. So let me know what you're thinking in that regard. Obviously, you can see that the history that I have set up gives a lot of potential for adventure hooks and connections to deep background. What am I asking you to ask? What do you think you need to know more about the history? What elements of the history intrigue you and you wonder why I did them that way? What part of it, like, what questions does the history inspire in you? Or what questions has the rest of what we've talked about in the settlement building inspired in you? What do you want to know about settlement building? Any of those things. You know, you guys get to talk too, at least to a certain extent. I think it's important. It's perhaps undervalued in some cases, the depth of history. Like, that's only a couple paragraphs, right? But it tells you a whole lot about the background, and it gives you an idea of what it's felt like in the area. And I don't think enough of that is really done in world building. Settlements don't get enough local attention. The feel of a settlement, what makes it different from other settlements, doesn't get enough local attention, and that's one of the reasons I developed this format. The gold versus black, I thought, was almost the classic. I decided to go, because I had decided to build this setting right on the edge of a massive swamp. The black dragon seemed fairly obvious, right? Rather than a red. The interesting thing about it is I actually have a poem I wrote from the dwarves' perspective. Talking about how acid breath, follows you down into the caverns. Flame rises, but when dwarves are fighting a black dragon, the acid runs downhill. You can't get away from it. And the gold is a pretty classic, good guy dragon. And I thought it was too southerly. A location, at least in my head, to have one of the northern dragons like a silver or something. I could, I suppose, have used ocean-going bronze, right? That might have been better, and maybe I could even conceivably change it. Very much reminded me of old school Black Sea Scroll mythology. Can you elaborate a little bit while I answer Tessie? All right, so on a given patrol of the watch, what are the scents they are bombarded with where? Well, a lot of that sort of thing is answered in the actual neighborhoods stuff, right? So in Dockside, you're going to smell fish because, the local places are fishing, shipping, warehouses. You smell the sea. You smell some fish. You smell rot. You smell things just left in the street because this is probably one of the roughest parts of town. In the Eastgate area, you smell flowers and gardens and growing things. In East Side, you smell beer and grain. In Escliff, it's a posh area with a Montague and Capulet feel. That's where the Sethandrian Black Scale, True Scale clan lives. The Sathandrian Manor is there. The stuff to keep the rope from rotting is going to be your standard old-fashioned tar smell. So yeah, that's a very reasonable question. On the green, you got the smell of trees, but you've also got the smells coming from the forge nearby. So you got the smell of horses because of the stables. In the market, you've got every possible smell because it's an ever-shifting area. Local and traveling merchants. Norcliffe is the other half of the tense but posh equation with the Aurian gold scale family and Goldenhall. So it really just smells clean. Norwall is where a lot of humans and dwarves live. Food and general goods storage. What does the water saturation bring out in the neighborhood surrounding the docks? Things like post-rain. A lot of swampy smell because the docks area is very low down. It is below the cliff, so it doesn't drain well. So you get a lot of backwash, and the dock side neighborhood starts to smell like swamp on top of everything else, which is one of the reasons it's the lower class area. Sowall is mixed and clean and poor. Now, an important person in Sowall is Lewin Stark. He's a human commoner, but he's a neighborhood elder. He runs the Big House, which is a soup kitchen, orphanage, and homeless shelter. And it's kind of intended to be a possible place that PCs grew up or had other connections to if they were poor. Sutcliffe is dwarves, halflings, and some humans working around the stone quarry. So no particular smell. Outside the wall, of course, smells like swamp. Hello, Hoilepa. How are ya? Welcome to the stream. We talk happily. I am going over my settlement of Marshcliff, and we are talking about the history of it and the feel of it. It's a small town of about 1,600 people on a cliff on the edge of a swamp. And the picture for that, just so you have an idea, eventually this is going to be the cover to the supplement. Is this thing that I'm getting to, I promise. That's what the cover to the supplement is currently intended. Yeah, no, absolutely. They would have a forever gumbo or a forever stew at the soup kitchen. Absolutely. You are completely correct. That would be how it goes. The taverns and the inn would also have forever stews of different kinds. Absolutely. And that's something we should probably make note of somewhere in there. When I get to the specific notations on that on the Big House, which I haven't done yet. So that's a very cool thing to remind me of. So the other thing, so you know what the place looks like, for our wonderful subscriber Hoilepa, this is what the town of Marshcliff looks like. To the south and east especially, it verges on a very dangerous swamp full of monsters. Because, you know, it's a setting specifically designed for fantasy tabletop role-playing. So, you know, we got to have threats nearby. I've actually got a whole series of adventures for it. Eventually, Hopefully I'll get them all written up, but it's the only one I have written up right now. I have to revise for Tales of the Valiant, and it is my Sunken Temple of the Swamp God. Again, I have to revise and make not D&D, but it looks like this. Yeah, the people living there hunt monsters, certainly, like there are giant crocodile, giant turtle. They don't hunt the more aberrant monsters, but they certainly hunt, giant fish, alligator gar, any basically natural sort of creature they might find in there. They absolutely do. But you wouldn't hunt anything like a troll, right? Or a hag, or anything that talks, or the things that are horrifically warped or tainted that might wander out of the swamp. Like in that picture, you certainly wouldn't want to eat an aboleth. Luckily, aboleths are in Tales of the Valiant, so I can keep the Sunken Temple of the Swamp God, but I just have to revise it. It was selling really well until I pulled it all off of DM's Guild because I was mad at Wizards of the Coast. Still am. Nope, that's not what I wanted to do. Let's go back to the dock. All right, so those have been some good questions that we've covered, and we've kind of done a little bit of a rundown on the neighborhoods. Next up, we get into a close-up of the castle. It's got its stables, its carriage house, the old gallows where they used to hang people publicly. They still do when it's absolutely necessary. The castle ward. Only the castle itself is there. The old gallows is rarely used. The gates are of wrought iron and enormous, usually left open. The wall doesn't have any ladders or stairs, no towers. It's too uneven to be defended from the top. Is there a particular person members of the watch go to get custom detailing on the helmet? It would mostly depend on the individual, but probably either the smith and priest of the smith god, known as Gowen Smith, at the blacksmith, or Govan, his brother, the armorer at the castle. Oh, that's a nasty thing to do. Endless supply of chopping off bits of a creature. That's vicious. Also not real smart. It could have serious side effects eating a regenerating entity. Since acid doesn't stop the regeneration, in the modern Hydra, let me double check that. Used to be only fire stopped the regeneration. I think that's still the case. In Tales of the Valiant, at least, which is what I prefer. But I will jump into the 2014 D&D book as well momentarily. Where's my Hydra? Oh, come on. I know there's a Hydra in here. You never said he was intelligent, just gluttonous. That's fair. Yeah, severe malnutrition too on the Hydra. You're not wrong. Yeah, so... Yeah, it regenerates unless you put fire on it. So... Same thing with trolls. Oh, nope, the troll takes acid or fire damage, so you could technically eat troll maybe more safely than you eat. You're not wrong. If you're smart enough to cook it, that's fair. That's fair. Foie gras hydra. All right, guys, we're getting creepy. Yep. The pasted liver of a hydra. Mmm. But yeah, fun times. Still, you're right. I didn't think of cooking for some danged reason. But all right, so we go back to Marshcliff again, right? And one of the next things that I think is really important, we've got the castle ward. We talk about the sewers as a, in this case, as a neighborhood, because the kobolds actually live down on there. In Hoylepa's world, sure, but I don't think that they're, remember, I don't think they're hunting the weird monsters for food. They're hunting the things that are mostly normal. What seasonings are popular in the town? Well, that's a really good question, because it really depends, because a lot of seasonings really historically aren't available until we get them from the New World, right? There's no such thing as most of the peppers. So black pepper, which isn't technically a pepper, salt is absolutely super common. So salt, black pepper, if they can afford it, they get saffron. They actually have to import honey. Also, I wouldn't necessarily call it a seasoning, but I would think that they might have an equivalent of the Cajun substance for thickening. I can't remember it right now. Made from a local root. Because it's fantasy, this swamp might have spicy peppers in it. Sometimes honey was. Sugar has been around. No, roux is the word for a gravy as the flour and butter mix as you're starting to make gravy. I'm actually talking about it's a gumbo thickener made from a root. It begins with an F. I can't remember it right now. No, not xanthan gum. Prairie swamp culture. I don't know what that is. Filet powder. Pioneer. Well, think about pioneers in general and how they interacted with swamps when they came to it, right? So filet powder is made from the sassafras, leaves. So they have kind of an equivalent. Onions, absolutely. Onions, garlic. Yeah. So, yeah, you know, it may not be North American, but they have a filet powder equivalent, possibly. A lot of the grain they're going to cultivate here is going to be rice, woundwort, spike rush, glasswort, bunch of beans. We got probably chestnuts. Yeah, all kinds of swamp roots. Wormwood. Birch syrup rather than maple. You could, yeah. Absolutely, you could have swamp plants that they eat for protection, this sort of thing. Caraway is European. Tarragon, hops. They got a lot of hops. Sage, oregano, parsley, rosemary. Parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme. Remember me to one who lives there. She once was a true love of mine. But yeah, all that stuff. So in a lot of ways, you're probably looking at like with the Celtic influences coming in to the more southern swampy area, you're looking at a Celtic Spanish-Italian fusion, maybe, with a lot of the parsley, sage, rosemary, thyme, oregano, which honestly ends up tasting a lot like, speaking as someone who lived in Louisiana for a good long while, ends up tasting quite a lot like Cajun food, except of course Cajun food then adds the peppers and things that we really only get from North America, Central and South America, right? So many things that we did not have until the Columbian Exchange. Corn, for instance. Central America has allspice, chia, and vanilla. We got South America, we got verbena, cocoa beans, anaquita. And now this is just what's going on now, of course. There's peppers all over the place now. That's an interesting saying. Yeah, potatoes and tomatoes, which are probably the super most popular things out there in terms of fruits and starches. And they're from North America, and nobody had them before that. Or they're from the Americas, I should say, and nobody had them before that. The three most popular drinks in town, I would say, are in this order: ale, mead, and then finally wine. It's not like they have a lot of choices, and it's not like the water is super clean when they're living in a swamp, so they have to cook it to drink it or ferment things in it to drink it regardless. So yeah, it's gonna be lightly alcoholic ale, beer, mead, and wine. The wines are going to be made from a variety of local berries, etc. And shipped in, of course. Everybody ships liquor all over the place. But one of the other important things when you're dealing with a place like this, like I said, I've got the sewers set up as an actual neighborhood, because that's where the kobolds live. They maintain it, and they live in their underground warren attached to it. The area is dark and dirty, but cheerful and busy around the clock. Which means that the town is a lot cleaner than a lot of cities that don't have good drainage or sewers. So one of the things that I think is super important when you're building a setting is ideas, adventure hooks. One of which is this door. The door into nowhere. An ancient dwarven door still stands in the last stretch of an equally old wall. Both sides of the wall are accessible. The door doesn't go anywhere. At least that's how it seems. No magic radiates from the door, but it resists all attempts to open it or go through it, even via spells. Rumor and folklore say the door goes somewhere the ancient dwarves thought was very important, possibly another plane. The Undercity. It is well known that the dwarves delved deep here long ago, but that all the lower levels were collapsed to keep the dragon and its minions from them. But a persistent rumor says that not all the dwarven halls collapsed. There was, after all, a whole city beneath the cliff. Somewhere deep beneath the sewers and catacombs, perhaps, there's a way into the lost dwarven city with its mithril mines and treasure vaults. Perhaps some hidden... Brigadoon? Maybe, is the one you're referring to. It's a very old concept. Perhaps some hidden cave nearby could give access to the treasure vaults of the dwarves. So yeah, there could be a whole dungeon underneath the town, maybe connected to the sewers. This one I'm really fond of. The two large dragonborn cities of the family have always been at odds from the very moment the black-scaled Sethandrians left the service of Bearskull. Recently, tensions have been rising again, almost to the point of feud. To make things worse, now is when a young male of the Aryan family and a young Sethandrian woman have fallen in love and swear they will be together regardless of what their families say. Phaedra Sethandrian has vowed bitter war if Tristan Aryan steals Iseult Sethandrian as his bride. So there's this potential weird romantic crossed with tragic subplot that PCs could try to save people from. Another one. Clean up this town. Knight Sergeant Nissa Goldenflame wants to root out the Thieves Guild. She thinks Sir Kirk may be corrupt. Is she right, or does she just not understand the reality of controlling crime in Marshcliff? What happens if the crime isn't organized? Yes, absolutely. It was explicitly designed as a Montague Capulet, Romeo Juliet integration. Gang problems. A group of dangerous thugs is threatening the people who frequent the Big House soup kitchen and shelter. Either Padraig Dragonshorn, the guildmaster of the Thieves Guild, or Lewin Stark want help stopping them. It's dangerous out there. Obviously, any number of things. But a terrible beast terrorizes the fisher folk outside the southern walls. It makes even those who live inside afraid to enter the swamp. Who will slay this monster? Why has Dame Riverward seen nothing of it? The old quarry. Strange noises come from the quarry at night. Folk thereabouts think it's haunted. The watch has found nothing. Aldous needs someone to investigate. Got a rumors table. Black-scaled kobolds and lizard folk are still seen sometimes in the swamp. Water trolls love to set up under bridges and extort passers-by. A coven of hags lives at nearby Herrick's Hill, a large hummock at the swamp's edge. The body of the great black dragon Cethadrius has been missing almost since his death. There are horrific undead trapped in the catacombs beneath Magmel, the large cemetery in town. Padraig Dragonshorn, the innkeeper, is actually a crime boss. Estevian Greyheart of the Tarnished Coin is a doppelganger, or a spy, or a fiend, or all three. Hester Spinyback and Emily Muckwader used to adventure together, but they bear some grudge neither will speak of. Yeah, so it's just stuff to add into the concepts of the world, just little hooks. One of the things I think is really important is connecting, whenever possible, connecting PCs to the world they're working in. Connecting players and their characters and getting them as invested as possible in the setting. To do that, you need the setting to be interesting enough and have hooks that they're willing to connect themselves to. Imagine, for instance, that somebody grew up in the Big House with Lewin Stark, or several people. Imagine that you're a rogue and you're a member of the Thieves Guild and you have to help Padraig Dragonshorn solve problems without falling afoul of the watch. Imagine that you're a member of either the Dragonborn families. It's a really cool idea. I don't know if it suits this setting in particularly, but maybe. I'm going to go ahead and cut and paste that. You know what? There might be a water troll who is. Like, he's not going to be the only water troll. Yeah, I very rarely want to just go crazy. I like to have things as clean and clear as possible, but I am absolutely taking these suggestions right now and saving them in a document in here so that I can maybe see which ones to use later. Yeah, the primary purpose of today was an example, right? It was, this is how you can build a settlement with depth to it. So I guess the question is, what if the acid of one of the Dragonborn is spicy and they use it in stew? The Dragonborn might, right? So maybe it's like a Dragonborn cook at the tavern? You know what? I bet it's not at the tavern. The Dragonborn cook in question is at a tavern, but it's at the Stinking Fish. The fisherman sailors tavern down at the docks. There could be a local plant that smells horrible for one or two races in particular. That's true. So I guess my question about that is, how does that affect PCs in play? What do we use it for? Like, it absolutely is cool, and I'm making a note of it. It's kind of like coriander slash other name for coriander. Shoot. Tastes like soap. Cilantro, that's the one. Could be an extreme version of people's response to coriander, cilantro. Especially since coriander is found... Where is coriander found? It's an annual herb. Tastes like soap to me. Supposedly has a slightly citrus taste. And it's native to the Mediterranean, so it would be native to this area. So there's a like super strong version of coriander slash cilantro. I think that's a neat idea. Thank you. They don't have alchemists, but they do have herbalists, and absolutely your herbalists would sell anti-mosquito creams. Like, most of the people would probably know how to make repellents themselves. It's super common. But the herbalists in town would sell it to people who aren't locals. Herbalists sell bug repellent lotion / potions. Most locals make their own. gonna throw my link in here again for my Discord. If you like talking about this stuff, we talk about this stuff on my Discord fairly regular. What are 3 examples of local magical thinking with a 2-to-1 relationship of true to false or vice versa? Oh, wow. Yeah, because it is a magical world and a magical worldview, so some of the magical thinking, some of the magical beliefs they have are true. Let's see. Obviously, both garlic and the herb moly ward off all blood-sucking creatures, including vampires. That's sort of true. Moly protects you from magic. That's also sort of true, except that the moly they're using isn't magically protective as much, although you can make potions with it that help, because it's a subspecies. The real magical moly is only found in certain places. The third thing I would say is that they believe that the wards on the walls keep out all evil spirits, which is false. It's you're the evil spirit? Well, hello, Rashataran. Welcome aboard Evil Spirit. Thank you for joining us. I will have to say, I will be... This is very nearly the end of our stream, because I actually got through more of it than I thought. But hopefully this helped show the sorts of things you can build into a settlement to make it... I do world building all the time. So my schedule for it is Sundays at 2 p.m. Eastern, Wednesdays at noon Eastern, and Fridays at 4 Eastern. On Tuesdays, I sometimes stream something random, and on Thursdays, I'm going to stream video games. You do have good questions, Tessie. I appreciate it. The other thing is, if you look right above where you chatted, Evil Spirit, there's the link to my Discord if you want to keep track of what's going on over there. You know what? We're going to go ahead and stick around maybe another hour. But what I'm going to do right now, actually, is go ahead and take another break for my voice, and we will come back in about 10 minutes. Does that sound good? Rashataran, which sounds like a fantastic character name, by the way. And if it's your real name, you're a blessed person, because it's just neat. Don't know if I pronounced it correctly, of course. But yeah. All right, we will take a look, and I am going to go rest my voice for about 10 minutes and smoke a cigarette, and then we will come back. I'm glad I did. We will come back and continue our conversations with the real, ask me anything and intensity. You too, have fun, Hoilepa. Having given the example, we will go back and start looking at the formats and the questions. All right? So I'm going to take about 10 minutes, and then I will be back to chat with you all. yeah, that link is to the world building series, but there's a ton more really cool ttrpg stuff on the whole website. And, you know, if you like the ttrpg stuff that I make, you can help me out by following, subscribing here, by subscribing for free to my YouTube, whatever, you know. And I do have a Patreon. Y'all could help me out with, you know. I kind of have to say all this stuff because if I want to keep doing this, I need support. Patreon also gets stuff nobody else gets, of course. But what we're going to do now, as I said, is get more interesting. We're not worried right now about what I'm making. Well, cool. I'm more than glad to help out with whatever. Get you into the community, as it were. Yeah, well, when it comes right down to it, I'm one of the closest things you'll find to a professional. I have been running games and building worlds since 1982. And I am currently a professional GM getting paid to run games for folks. And I do these world building streams and stuff like that. I'm yet to be, you know, really famous published because I only really started a couple years ago, you know, doing it professionally. Although, like I said, I've been doing it a long time. So what we're going to do is we're going to leap over here. I'm going to make a new folder in my place called Stream Village. I'm going to open up a new document for us to take notes on. And the other thing I'm going to do is close the map and open a new one. All right. So the question becomes, right at the beginning, two major questions arise. And I'm actually we're going to go over to the notes section first before we start mapping anything. Two major questions arise. Maybe three. First of all, we're going to do a small village, right? Maybe like 500 people, because like I pointed out earlier, and you can see it in the starter tips on my website, all you need for an initial settlement is a small village. It's a lot easier to work with, and you can get a lot more investment in it. That being the case, so we look at a village of about 500 people. That's small enough that the player characters, if they're from there, could know everyone in town, which can be really helpful, actually. That being the case, the first thing we need to decide, first two things we need to decide are, where is this village? Is it in the mountains? Is it in the forest? Is it along a river on the plains? Are we building a village like in the middle of the Great Plains or the steppes or something? We don't want to do a swamp. That's what I was just showing. It can be. But I find that if you're going to have a big city there, you can concept the small village and grow it, but you have to know that you're going for a big city to do it, right? Whereas when it comes to your starter settlement for tabletop role-playing, which is what we're working on now, It's just better to stick with a village. Yeah, we could do a forested area right along the mountains, right? Like an Appalachian or Scottish. Geothermal forested mountain? Why geothermal? Like, is it geothermal because it's an active volcano? With like hot springs, like we've got a village somewhere like near Yosemite. Geothermal is an area that is generally very volcanically active, with geysers and hot springs and things like that. Yeah, so it'd be like Yosemite, not actually an active volcano, but a certain amount of on a mountain. No more swamp. We just did a swamp. We're not doing a swamp for this one. Hot springs. We got hot springs in the Rio Quente. Water issuing from a hot spring is heated geothermally. We got a geyser in active volcanic zones such as Yellowstone National Park. You might have magma. Warm Springs, Georgia has non-volcanic hot springs. Hot springs all over the world. There are geothermal springs all over the Rocky Mountains, looks like. And hot springs in the French volcanic region Auvergne in the Alps. So, yeah, we can definitely have like a valley, a very forested valley, which is geothermally active with dormant volcanoes. Northern part is covered in hills. Southern part is mountainous and dotted with... Yeah, all right. So a huge oak forest with major rivers and hot springs and formerly volcanic, right? So that being the case, let's write that down. Dormant volcanoes, hot springs, forested mountain valley, village on one of the rivers, because they almost always... I said it should... The starter location shouldn't necessarily always be a village, but especially if you're new at running tabletop role-playing games, villages are easier. And there's a whole lot of cool things you can do with them, even when you're working much further into being experienced at it, right? One of the things about big cities is, why didn't somebody else in the big city solve whatever this problem is? Whereas if you're in the village, you may be the only people around who can solve the problem. A village where you're the people who know what's going on and you're connected to everybody gives you a lot of reasons to hook the player characters into things. Rather than just, we're roving adventurers. They could become roving adventurers because they started doing these things in their village, right? So at any rate, the starter location we're working with now is Dormant Volcanoes, Hot Springs, Forested Mountain Valley, Village on Rivers. That gives us some interesting stuff. We know a lot of the geography. So the other thing we need to decide, fundamentally, while going from the geography, is what cultural base are we working for? Yeah, or because the starting quest went very, very wrong. Which it can. What cultural base are we wanting to work from? You could say just general European, but that's a little boring. Everybody does it. And it isn't actually general European when they do it. When most people make what they think is a Europe-based setting, what they're actually making is an Anglo-centric setting with a couple of French bits that they didn't realize. Because the majority of the majority of the fantasy out there is very Anglo-centric, and it's just been normalized. Almost Dutch architecture crossed with Japanese architecture. Yeah, but when you start crossing things, it gets complicated. So why don't we, let's see. But a Germanic, Dutch is a subsection of Germanic, obviously. And the Dutch are lowlands, which, that's the big thing, is that the Netherlands, the Dutch, are all lowlands. They are lowland Germans, effectively. That's what the Netherlands means. So their architecture represents adaptations to lowland architecture, not to mountains, generally speaking. So you see a lot of, yeah, that's what the Dutch in, I didn't know, in a Dutch settlement, you see a lot of low-lying things. You see things built to stay up out of areas that are wet and watery. So you might use some Dutch architecture along the hot springs, but mostly you're going to actually be looking like this. So Alpine architecture actually tends to be very similar regardless. So maybe we are looking at Alpine. Now this is a little more advanced than we'd want. Probably. But it gives you an idea of what things might look like once I get it saved and then shared. Okay. You've got them clustered down in the valley, but you don't have the kind of buildings that are built for dealing with floods and the fact that they literally, a lot of the Netherlands is on reclaimed land from the ocean built behind dikes. I'm not sure about Incan simply because I haven't studied enough of it. And I don't want to do it wrong. I think we may be better off sticking with an alpine approach for this one. Again, this is a starter village. This isn't advanced development, right, Chili? When it comes to pale-skinned folks like ourselves, dealing in cultures like that is more of a high skill bar, right? People don't know really how to interact with them. But given that visual and the concept, we're looking, at an alpine village. Dormant volcanoes, hot springs, forested mountain valley village on rivers. So that being the case, let us build ourselves some land. Water level, none. Or almost none. We're just going to put it in when we want it. All right, so, but it did give me an idea of how it goes, right? So we're actually mapping the area first, not the town itself. You can do the town first, but here's a question. How do you know what the town is built like if you don't know the terrain around it? All right, so I'm going to take this one out so we have a little pass through the mountains there. And that one out, another little pass through the mountains there into other valleys. Okay? We already have a pass up here. So let's do some water. It's definitely going to be wider because this is a biggish area, right? We'll have the primary river source up here. Secondary river source. Oh. That's because I didn't put it in yet. Thank you for mentioning that.
No.
There.
No.
Is that better? That was silly. And we'll put a secondary river source up here, connected there. Put our hot springs there. Just to be scary. Nope, not that one. Maybe that one? Nope. Look, here be monsters. We can take them out if we want. That's just me being silly. All right, so it's just a village. So we do not need a big old thing. Boom. There's our village. We can get into actually mapping the village at some point. Y'all go ahead and let me know if there's anything specific you think we should throw in there. And keep in mind, like I said, putting the monsters in, that doesn't mean they're there yet. It also doesn't mean they're not, because, having monsters around somewhere is probably a good idea. All right, this is an alpine area, my friends, which means there's going to be a lot of pines. But it doesn't mean that will be all there is. What it does mean is that, first of all, it's going to be lots of freaking hills. So let's get some hills in here. They could. It really depends on if our people are that primitive, or like over to the west, there's actual storm giants. In which case, they would be absolutely correct to believe that unstoppable monsters that create thunder are out there. If you see what I'm saying. And we don't give any details to the areas beyond the mountains because they don't know about them. Basically, one of the things to do here is have this village have been isolated for a while so that it's detached from the rest of the communities. So they don't have anybody to go to for help. They don't know the outer world. So that when you do expand beyond this, your player characters are learning new things legitimately. Right? You don't have to know all the stuff out there because they don't know all the stuff out there. Making a note of giants to the west. What's interesting is I actually made bellowing giants or thunder giants, lightning dragons on the other. All right, look, we want this village to have a chance to survive. Heck, this is a starter village, like first level characters. Let them run into some stuff that's crazy, a little safer than that before they just stay out of the mountains. Go southeast down the river. Because, yes, having a fight, having a thing where the giants and the dragons end up fighting in the middle of their freaking village is a great adventure, but probably apocalyptic. Anyway. You'll notice that I put the pines along the hills because a lot of the time your evergreens are on the higher elevations. Okay. Obviously, you're probably going to have these are warm streams in addition to the springs right there. So you're probably going to have like this mountain used to be a volcano. This mountain used to be a volcano, right? And they may have pools attached as probably have pools attached as well. Why don't we go ahead and do that? And then some more trees like oaks. Now this is going to be all forest all around it because there's really no reason for them to have a lot of open land up here. They're an isolated village in the forest. They don't know nothing about all that other stuff. Let's throw in some inked oaks for variety. This is Wonderdraft, by the way, and I love it. All right, so it's going to have, like, they're really scared over there, the west. So they got, like, one bridge going over the river, and it's going to be on the east side. Not that dang big, or even that big. All right, so we have the location of our village, and it's vaguely alpine. Let's think, you know, alpine France, alpine Switzerland. So does Switzerland have hot springs? They do, Luckerbad. Oh my goodness, that right there, that is pretty. Hang on, I will share this. This is really pretty. That is the hot springs town of Luckerbad in Switzerland. That's kind of the sort of place we're looking at, right? So let's run back to our map. But also, what does Luckerbad mean? Bad in German means bath. Luck is the district. In German, it is also Lagerbad. In 1229, Luckerbad was mentioned for the first time and called Buzz. So pretty. Baths of Lux. Luke's Baths, so we should use Bad for the hot springs, right? Because that's the name they use all over that area. So whose baths are they? What does Luke mean? White baths. From the Greek word leukos, meaning white or bright. What color is the water, guys? What color, because of the cool minerals in the water, in the hot springs, what color is the water? This will have a significant effect on the name of the town. What is the color of the water? Not necessarily. Depends on the mineral content. Blood from iron. Maybe. Do y'all like that? The idea of you know, the town being named Bloodbath? Keep in mind, this is a town people live in. It's not the bad guy's house. Do we want to name a town Bloodbath? Yeah, hot springs can be blue, green, yellow, orange, red, brown, white from the microorganisms and dissolved minerals in the water. Blue comes from dissolved silica. Green, yellow, orange, and red are from heat-loving bacteria and algae. White springs are caused by sulfur, red and brown by iron or iron sulfide bacteria. So, Resha, Chili, do we want red? Do we want to go with Bloodbath or Red Bath? Because in German, Red Bath is Rotbadden. It can be algae, yes, or it can be iron or iron sulfide bacteria. You can vote for those. Sounds pretty metal. So we're going, all right. All right, so it's either Rotbadden, which is red bath, or Blutbad, which is blood bath. If we do it in French, it would be sang. It'd basically be bain de sang in French. So it would be Blutbad or Blutbadden, which would look like this, because that means blood baths, or what do y'all think? Blutbadden, Bain de Sang, Rotbadden, or Bain de Rouge? Rotbadden. Okay. Rotbadden it is. And that being the case, we will label this sucker in red. Rotbadden. Like that? Like the actual Deutsche? Ich spreche ein bisschen Deutsch. Nicht wahr? So this is the Rotbadden Valley, and this is the village of Rotbadden. All right, what do we think of that? The village of Rotbadden in the Rotbadden Valley, and who knows what town this used to be ever. Although this town could be in my country of Theodonia in the setting of the successor states of Rega, or not. We'll get to that. So I definitely have to shut down soon and go do some other things like eat supper and take care of my kids. But I think we've gotten somewhere. What I think I want to do on Sunday, especially if all of you can make it back and we can get some more people, is we take this and we use it as our basis for step-by-step building a setting, building a village setting, and then adding some critters and monsters and threats and things to the surroundings. Can I expect some of you guys back on Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern? Because I hope so. Be running this thing from probably 2 to 4 or 2 to 5, and we can go step by step down through my settlement format and fill it out and figure out how this little town is put together. Okay? And meanwhile, check out my other work on YouTube, on my website, get onto the Discord, etc., etc. And if you decide you have the money and you can help me out, become a patron or just contribute directly on the site. Any of those things, I appreciate it. Oh, I hate self-promo, but you know, it's part of the job. So here we are. Let us save our Rotbadden Valley in our new section here. And having done that, we will go and change the name of Stream Village to Rotbadden. Save this and close it. Close it. Alright, so we now have a file area called Rotbadden that we're keeping track of, and that will be cool. I thank you all for stopping by and spending time with me this afternoon. I will be streaming again, as I said, on Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern, and we will continue building the settlement of Rotbadden together, step by step, from the top.